All right, in the interest of full disclosure, Countercurrents is my ex-publisher. They published 3 of my books, and then they stopped publishing my books, I believe it was 3 years ago, at which point in time I was picked up by my current publisher, which is terrorhousepress.com, and they've republished everything that Countercurrents decided not to publish anymore. So just to say, me commenting on an article at the Countercurrent site, I do have to acknowledge there's a history there. But what makes me comment on this article, what makes me interested in this article, is not the history that I have with Countercurrents, but rather how I think Countercurrents as a site is paradigmatic in a way, as representative of the strain of white nationalism, which when it tries to pursue the topic of MGTOW in an honest manner, does not succeed. They fall flat on their face. They end up making disingenuous arguments. They appeal to straw men, and it's ultimately a rather dehumanizing and alienating attempt to appeal to MGTOW, to win them back, to get them back on the plantation, to use I know a loaded metaphor. But you see it from the very title of this article, MGTOW as a Slave Religion, which was published a couple of days ago, October 25th, at Countercurrents, and I will link to it. The article writer is James Dunphy. I don't know who that is. This is nothing personal against him. But anyway, I want to go through this a little bit and talk about what I mean when I say that the pitch or the appeal that these kinds of very agendized WNs have when they attempt to counter MGTOW, to counter the force of MGTOW, how they so often fall flat on their face, and the reason is, it becomes clear ultimately that they don't really care that much about men's well-being. They want men to make their well-being, their own well-being, subservient to this this demographic agenda of getting there to be more white people in the world. Now, look, I'm fine with people marrying and having large families. I think it's great. I think it's beautiful. If the marriage is good, if people are happy together, if none of the pitfalls, none of the landmines that men so often step on today in today's cultural climate, if those are avoided, then great, fine. I am an anti-depopulationist, and I want to make that very clear. That doesn't mean I think everybody should have tons of kids. I think it should be up to the individual, but I think I think marriage is a good thing. It's not, in an ideal state, marriage would be a good thing, because it is not good for man to be alone, as I talked about a few weeks ago after I read that verse in church, and so forth. But we are not living in ideal times. We are living in the Kala Yuga, and in this wretched cultural environment that we've got going today, you've got to do better than this if you're going to be arguing against MGTOW. I'm not saying that MGTOW is bulletproof or that it's above being critiqued. I don't believe that at all. But let's just see what this James Dunphy tries to do here in this article. and hopefully it'll make my case for me. So it starts, MGTOW refers to men going their own way. Its proponents believe men should drop out of the dating scene because of modern women's bad behavior and the laws which enable it. While MGTOWs are correct that the average man faces historically novel perils on the dating scene, their solution is wrong from a white nationalist perspective. Okay, well, why should we care about their solution being wrong from a white nationalist perspective? Again, they should, again, nothing against white people reproducing, and nothing against white people having white children. But again, you know, if your argument is just, well, you've got a lot of good points there, but from my ideological perspective, you should do something different, and even if it makes you miserable, you know, you have to basically take one for the team, because white nationalism. All right, that's not very compelling, I don't think. Okay, so here in this paragraph he says, first we must acknowledge that MGTOW is not an ideal scenario. Suppose by some magic power we could bestow upon MGTOWs the option of either remaining MGTOW or meeting their soulmate. Okay, so alternatively we could offer them the option of remaining MGTOW or becoming a chick magnet. Something tells me in either scenario there'd be mass defections for the MGTOW movement. Well, as far as the finding your soulmate, that brings to mind Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. You know, yeah, if you actually meet someone with whom you share a bond, and you manage to avoid the pitfalls, avoid the landmines, then great. And yeah, it's not ideal to be willfully alone, as opposed to having a companion to help you get through life, right? But this whole, so yeah, it's from that way of thinking is, you know, there's a point there. This whole thing about becoming a chick, remaining MGTOW or becoming a chick magnet, that confuses MGTOW with incels. Incels want to be in a relationship but find that they can't. MGTOWs are opting out of being in a relationship. So there's a difference there, and that is not a distinction without a difference. There is a legitimate, substantial difference there that is not acknowledged in this article. Okay, so he gives this caveat here to his credit. He says, this is not to say that men who choose to be single for reasons other than MGTOW are necessarily living a bad life. What if they, for reasons other than MGTOW? Well, okay, I'll just put that aside. Men who choose to be single. Some men are better actualized as bachelors, and he gives the example of Nikola Tesla, who never married, and who's responsible for world alternating current electricity. So yeah, some men are better self-actualized as bachelors, or they're able to live more, to do more good for themselves and for humanity if they are bachelors. He admits that, but he says, MGTOW doesn't harm men who become self-actualized in bachelorhood, but rather those who might otherwise be able to find a woman if MGTOW ideology hadn't discouraged them. I don't think anyone who subscribes to MGTOW, and again, I want to make clear, I'm saying this not as somebody who is MGTOW himself, who claims to be MGTOW himself. I'm sympathetic to MGTOW in many ways, but I will not be pigeonholed, and I will not be put in one category just because I see a lot of, because I see that people who argue for this thing often make a lot of good points. Sometimes they don't make such good points. But in any case, I don't think that men opt for the MGTOW ideology, that the MGTOW ideology discourages them. I think they have I think they get kicked in the teeth by living in the culture that we're living in and getting abused in one way or another, and then they choose to be MGTOW. So that really, there's something kind of intellectually dishonest about that, the way that is phrased. Discouraging white men from seeking white women is very problematic from a white nationalist perspective. Problematic is, what do you have, purple hair? You an SJW? I know that's kind of a cheap shot, but the word problematic is not one that I enjoy hearing these days. Anyway, very problematic from a white nationalist standpoint because marriage and the births of white babies are crucial at a time when whites are proportionally declining relative to other races. Okay, again, don't be MGTOW because white race. That's what they have to say here. That's the point that they're making here. And the thing is, people are not pawns on a global demographic chessboard. People have souls. And so just saying, treating people as if, well, the important thing is no matter what it does to you, you've got to do your best to reproduce, even if in so doing you render yourself in attempting to do such, to marry and reproduce, you do great harm to yourself by stepping on one of the many cultural landmines that are everywhere today. So yeah, I mean, again, nothing against white people reproducing at all, and nothing against large families at all. So here's something that I want to highlight. In particular, MGTOW, I'll skip down to this paragraph to get it really where I think it really should be highlighted. MGTOW certainly doesn't make sense as a kind of protest. If white men think they will induce white women to draw up a better social contract with them by going on strike, they are wrong, because non-white men will happily step in to serve as strike breakers. This just shows a kind of ignorance about the demographics of MGTOW. On my old channel, which I had before YouTube deleted it, I had my most heavily visited video was one entitled, "Why Are There So Many Black MGTOW Men?" Because I was honestly interested in that question. And I got a lot of interesting responses. MGTOW is not a white phenomenon. So somehow saying, well, it's just a bunch of white men who are declining to marry, but the non-whites they're all out there. They're willing and ready to wife up all of your potential white brides, white man. You're appealing to this kind of racial animus here, that if you don't pursue white women, then you're going to see our women taken by these non-white men. That's just that shows ignorance of what the demographics of MGTOW. MGTOW is not a white thing. It's got if you type in MGTOW in a search engine, you'll see a lot of non-whites. Believe me. So to see it through that kind of racial lens is really sort of silly. Okay, so he says, the present relationship environment will not last indefinitely. Cultural and technological changes may eventually may eventually provide the average man with more bargaining power in sexual relationships. Okay, well, eventually, when circumstances change, when the culture changes, but do we just bank on that happening? Seems foolish. He goes on to say, we may simply be in an evolutionary bottleneck of sorts. Whites of the future will be descended from the survivors of this bottleneck. And here we get to more shaming language. They will probably not look back on the MGTOWs of the current year as altruistic sacrificial lambs, but rather as not worth remembering. See, if you opt out of the dating and marriage scene, and you choose to do your own thing because you think that's the best thing for your overall well-being, the best way to pursue your God-given talents for the good of yourself and for the good of society, then you're going to be thought of as not worth remembering. A slave religion. Okay. So he goes on to say, even if they do venerate MGTOWs for having spoken out against a poor social environment, they will not laud them for casting their genetic endowment into the dust as an act of protest. Again, we are not demographic pawns on a global chessboard. We are people with souls, and no one, no man, no woman, no child should be guilted into sacrificing what is in his best interests for some ideology. Okay? And making that kind of argument just rings hollow because it displays that the person making the argument doesn't really care about you. Doesn't really care whether you are just going to end up in a situation where you're absolutely suicidally miserable, or not, as long as you just start churning out those white babies. So make yourself miserable for the sake of white babies. More white babies. Nothing against white babies, you understand. It's just seeing it that way, seeing them as pawns on a global chessboard. So something, again, so incredibly dehumanizing and alienating about that kind of appeal. MGTOW is a slave religion in the Nietzschean sense, insofar as it attempts to cloak a less than ideal scenario as righteous protest. White men considering MGTOW should instead opt to live a noble life. So you're ignoble if you choose not to marry, if you choose bachelorhood, if you choose celibacy. That's ignoble. But instead, they should date, marry, and have children. Inevitably, some of them, including some of you reading this, will experience divorce, custody battles, and so on. But these are the inevitable sufferings of those who live a noble life. Again, can I make it any more clear than that? That they don't care about you. This kind of argument betrays this callousness. You should live a noble life even if it leads to divorce, custody battles, and so on, right? So, skipping down a little bit. Okay, so, last thing he says, this may be a cliche. That's always an ominous way to begin a sentence. People will pardon you for saying something that's not compelling if you begin with this disclaimer that, okay, what I'm about to say is not very compelling, but anyway, don't go too hard on me. So anyway, this may be a cliche, but it's better to try and fail than give up without trying. Regardless of the outcome, men who try to build a relationship with a woman outrank men who give up and go their own way. Outrank men. you give up and go their own way. Like, who is the bestower of rank that is being talked about here? And what is this, some kind of social credit scheme? Like, hey, yeah, even if you try, you know, you gotta just put yourself out there. You gotta shoot your shot and get shot down over and over and over again. And you've got to put yourself through unmitigated strife and peril and psychological damage. You've got to do all that. Because you want, if you do that, you'll be noble, and we're going to say that you have rank. Who's bestowing this rank? Again, this whole appeal is so empty. It's so hollow that it needs to be pointed out. Am I wrong? Tell me what you think below. Is MGTOW a slave religion or not? Let me know. Thanks for watching.